For decades, most Americans followed a simple income logic. You found a stable role, stayed consistent, gained experience, received periodic pay increases, and structured your entire life around that one stream of earnings. Housing choices, family planning, education decisions, and long-term goals were built on the assumption that one primary income would remain reliable. After 2025, that assumption quietly collapsed. The collapse did not come from a single crisis or headline event. It came from accumulated pressure. Economic forces that once moved slowly began interacting with each other at speed. By the time people recognized the shift, the old income logic was already broken. To understand what failed, it is important to understand what the old model depended on. It depended on three conditions working together. Employers needed predictable growth. Labor needed long-term relevance. Living costs needed to rise slowly enough that wages could keep pace. After 2025, none of those conditions held consistently. Corporate behavior changed first. Large employers increasingly optimized for flexibility rather than loyalty. Instead of building large permanent teams, companies restructured work into narrower roles, shorter timelines, and project-based output. This allowed firms to adjust quickly to demand changes, but it weakened long-term income continuity for workers. At the same time, technology accelerated role compression. Tools powered by automation reduced the number of people needed for many tasks. This did not eliminate work, but it changed how value was measured. Output mattered more than presence. Results mattered more than tenure. Workers who once advanced through years of experience found that experience alone no longer protected income growth. Another pressure came from cost structures. Living expenses across the United States increased unevenly but persistently. Housing, healthcare services, education costs, and everyday necessities absorbed a larger share of earnings. Even when wages rose, purchasing power often did not. Many households felt like they were running faster without moving forward. Under the old model, this mismatch could be managed. Workers expected steady progression. Over time, higher earnings compensated for rising costs. After 2025, progression became unstable. Raises became inconsistent. Role eliminations became common. Lateral moves replaced upward moves. The labor market looked strong on the surface. Job postings existed. Hiring continued in specific sectors, but income stability weakened beneath the surface. Many roles offered pay without durability. Contracts replaced careers. Temporary demand replaced long-term planning. Another structural shift involved risk transfer. In the earlier income model, employers absorbed much of the uncertainty. Training costs, demand swings, and productivity fluctuations were managed at the organizational level. After 2025, that risk shifted toward individuals. Workers became responsible for maintaining relevance, managing income gaps, and absorbing volatility. Employment relationships became transactional. Loyalty lost economic value. Adaptability replaced seniority. This shift altered how people experienced work. Income stopped feeling like a steady foundation and started feeling conditional. Many Americans found that even strong performance did not guarantee continuity. Restructuring decisions often had little to do with individual contribution. Demographics intensified the strain. An aging workforce competed with younger workers who adapted quickly to new tools and delivery formats. Mid-career professionals faced pressure from both sides. Experience alone was not enough. Continuous reinvention became necessary. Geographic assumptions also broke. Location once determined earning potential. Certain cities justified higher costs because income opportunities were concentrated there. After widespread remote adoption, that relationship weakened. Employers adjusted pay structures. Workers faced new competition. Income advantages tied to geography eroded. The old income model also relied on predictability. Predictable schedules, predictable expenses, predictable progression. Once unpredictability entered every layer, the model lost coherence. Households that relied on one paycheck experienced stress when income paused or fluctuated. Short disruptions created long consequences. Savings meant for long-term goals were redirected toward short-term stability. Financial planning horizons shortened. What made this breakdown more severe was timing. These changes occurred while trust in institutional stability declined. People no longer believed that systems would self-correct quickly. Waiting for conditions to return to normal stopped making sense. By late 2025, a pattern was visible. Individuals who relied entirely on traditional employment structures experienced income fragility. Those who diversified how income was generated, even modestly, showed more resilience. This was not about working more hours. It was about how income was structured. The old model tied income directly to time and employer approval. The new environment punished that dependence. Income linked only to hours became vulnerable to interruption. Income linked to value delivery and ownership showed greater durability. Another hidden failure involved skill dependency. Workers trained for narrow internal processes found those processes replaced or outsourced. Skills that could not travel lost economic leverage. The income model assumed that skills matured slowly. Reality showed skills depreciated faster than expected. Education pathways also lost alignment with income outcomes. Credentials alone no longer guaranteed earning power. Employers prioritized applied capability. This widened the gap between expectation and outcome for many professionals. Psychologically, the shift was destabilizing. People raised under the old model were taught that consistency produced security. After 2025, consistency without adaptability produced stagnation. That reversal confused planning instincts built over decades. The breakdown was not evenly distributed. Some industries adjusted earlier, others lagged. But eventually, the pattern reached most sectors. Income became episodic. Stability became personal rather than institutional. Importantly, this did not mean opportunity disappeared. It meant opportunity moved. It shifted away from fixed pathways toward flexible systems. Individuals who recognized this early began reorganizing how they earned. They stopped thinking in terms of one role supporting an entire life. They started thinking in terms of layered income responsibilities. Core income for essentials, supplemental income for growth, ownership-linked income for long-term stability. This mindset contrasted sharply with the old model, which discouraged complexity. Simplicity once worked because institutions absorbed volatility. Once that support weakened, simplicity became exposure. The breakdown after 2025 forced a reassessment of what income actually represents. It stopped being a reward for loyalty and became a reflection of positioning. Positioning in demand flows, positioning in value chains, positioning in ownership structures. Americans did not choose this shift. It emerged from economic reality. Ignoring it became costly. The old income model broke because it relied on conditions that no longer exist at scale. Stable employers, slow technological change, manageable living cost growth, clear career ladders, shared risk. Once those pillars weakened, the structure collapsed. Understanding this breakdown is not about nostalgia. It is about clarity. Without understanding why the old system failed, rebuilding income becomes guesswork. In the next part, the focus will move away from what broke and toward what replaced it. Not trends, not advice culture, but the specific income behaviors and structural adjustments that allowed Americans to regain control after the old model stopped working. When the old income model collapsed, Americans did not receive a manual for what came next. There was no official transition period. People were forced to adapt in real time, often while managing unstable earnings, rising costs, and uncertain work arrangements. What separated those who regained stability from those who remained stuck was not intelligence, motivation, or hours worked. It was how they restructured income at a foundational level. The first major shift was psychological. People stopped treating income as something granted by a system and started treating it as something engineered. This change mattered because the old model trained workers to optimize within a narrow framework. Perform well, stay compliant, wait for progression. After 2025, waiting became a liability. Income began to be viewed as an output of positioning rather than permission. Positioning in markets, positioning in demand, positioning in ownership chains. Those who adapted successfully built income around control points. Control over pricing, control over delivery, control over client relationships. Control did not mean total independence. It meant reducing reliance on a single gatekeeper. Many Americans found that even partial control dramatically changed outcomes. A professional who shifted from a fully internal role to a client-facing function gained negotiating power. A specialist who documented results instead of responsibilities gained portability. These changes did not require abandoning employment. They required redesigning how value was delivered. Another defining change involved how people combined income sources. Under the old model, multiple income streams were seen as distractions. After 2025, they became risk management tools. The key difference was intentionality. Random side work created exhaustion. Structured income layers created resilience. People who stabilized income built layers with distinct roles. One layer covered essentials. It prioritized reliability over growth. Another layer focused on expansion. It allowed variability, but offered upside. A third layer emphasized durability. It was slower, often tied to ownership or long-term participation. This approach reduced emotional dependence on any single source. When one layer weakened, others compensated. Income volatility became manageable instead of catastrophic. Skill development also changed character. Instead of accumulating credentials, people focused on economic relevance. They asked different questions. Where does demand persist even during slowdowns? What problems directly affect revenue or cost control? Which skills shorten decision cycles or reduce operational friction? Skills tied to outcomes gained value. Skills tied only to processes lost leverage. Workers who could clearly connect their contribution to measurable impact retained income continuity more effectively. This shift also changed how people marketed themselves. Titles mattered less. Proof mattered more. Case histories replaced resumes. Demonstrated outcomes replaced years of experience. This allowed individuals to operate across sectors and formats without restarting income from zero. Another adaptation involved time allocation. The old model rewarded availability. The new environment rewarded effectiveness. People began protecting focused time for income-building activities, rather than filling schedules with low-leverage tasks. This required saying no to work that consumed energy without strengthening positioning. Over time, this discipline improved income quality even when total hours decreased. Household financial behavior evolved alongside income behavior. People stopped planning around best-case earnings and started planning around minimum reliable output. This reversed traditional budgeting logic. Instead of asking how much they could spend if income went well, they asked how stable life remained if income dipped. This led to flexible expense structures and intentional buffers. Savings were no longer treated as leftovers. They became operational reserves. Reserves created patience. Patience improved decision quality. People with reserves avoided panic-driven choices that locked them into weak income arrangements. This change alone accounted for significant divergence in outcomes. Two households with similar earnings experienced very different stress levels based on reserve discipline. Another major shift was how people approached ownership. Ownership stopped being an abstract goal and became a practical income stabilizer. This did not always mean large acquisitions. It included minority stakes, profit participation, revenue sharing, and long-term operating roles. These arrangements aligned effort with ongoing participation rather than one-time compensation. Ownership introduced delayed reward, but it also introduced durability. Income tied to ongoing value creation proved more resistant to sudden disruption. Geographic flexibility reinforced these changes. People decoupled income from location wherever possible. This reduced exposure to high fixed costs and expanded opportunity sets. Income followed demand rather than address. Over time, this weakened the old hierarchy where certain locations dictated earning potential. Value delivery replaced proximity. Importantly, adaptation was not smooth. Many Americans experienced unstable phases. Income experiments failed. Learning curves were steep. But patterns emerged. Those who treated income as a system improved outcomes faster. Those who clung to role-based identity struggled longer. The new income reality rewarded people who understood trade-offs. Stability versus upside. Control versus scale. Speed versus durability. Instead of seeking perfect solutions, they optimized combinations. Another overlooked change involved expectations. People recalibrated what stability meant. Stability no longer meant sameness. It meant recoverability. The ability to absorb shocks and reconfigure quickly became the new definition of security. This mindset reduced fear. Fear had previously driven poor decisions, including overcommitment to weak roles or avoidance of necessary change. By embracing adaptability as normal rather than exceptional, people regained agency. The breakdown of the old income model exposed a truth that had been hidden by decades of institutional buffering. Income security was never permanent. It was contextual. When context changed, behavior had to change with it. Those who adapted did not chase trends. They studied structure. They asked how money actually moved, who controlled access, where value accumulated over time. This analytical approach replaced wishful thinking with clarity. After 2025, Americans who rebuilt income successfully did so by aligning with economic reality rather than resisting it. They stopped waiting for restoration and started constructing alternatives. The old model rewarded loyalty. The new environment rewarded relevance. The old model promised progression. The new environment demanded positioning. This shift marked the end of inherited assumptions and the beginning of intentional income design. Understanding what replaced the old income model is not about copying others. It is about recognizing patterns that repeatedly produced resilience under new conditions. That understanding is what separates temporary survival from long-term stability. This completes the revised analysis of how Americans responded once the old income model stopped working and what allowed income systems to function again under post-2025 conditions.